Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm very happy to be here to host this talk by MARCIA TRAJANO, who will be leading our live with the theme Freedom from Guilt. So I would like to take a brief moment for a couple of announcements. First is last month, the United States Spiritist Federation hosted the 17th U.S. Spiritist Symposium with a primary focus on the theme of spiritual path to mental balance. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch the event yet, I invite you to visit the USSF YouTube channel. There you can access the talks, discussion panels, and Q&A sessions from the symposium. Also, there is a podcast-like series, Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, based on the works by Joanna de Angelis. There is a new episode every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The weekly series offer a safe space to confront, compare, correlate, and expand spirituality concepts from a psychological lens, bringing insights, actionable tips, and real-world advice to help you lead a better life. Please subscribe to receive notifications of new episodes at the USSF YouTube channel. Plus, on screen, please note there is a QR code. If you want to help the USSF
are two-dimensional square barcodes
produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, scan the QR codes on screen for your donation. Now, back to MARCIA TRAJANO. It is so good to have you with us today. Together with everyone who is watching this broadcast now, we want to give you a very warm welcome as you discuss freedom from guilt. Knowing that we are all eager to hear from MARCIA, I would like to formally introduce her. MARCIA is the president, one of the founders of the Solitude Center for Spiritual Living. She is also one of the co-founders of the Christian Spiritist Community of Atlanta and a former board member of the U.S. Spiritist Federation. She is a Spiritist for more than 25 years and has participated in giving talks and leading study groups in English and Portuguese. With a master's degree in management technology, MARCIA currently works in the field of project management. Now, let us listen to and hear from MARCIA TRAJANO.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here, and we're going to discuss today guilt, right? So that's the biggest portion of our talk today is guilt, but also what do we do to be free from what I can call those painful grips or shackles or prisons, right? It's not easy for any of us. As a student of Joanna de Angelis, we see this topic peppered in many of her books, and today we're going to talk mostly stemming from two of her books, Jesus in Our Days and Existential Conflicts. But let's go ahead and get started just to give us a visual, not much for you to see, but we're going to reflect upon some definitions, causes, and examples of guilt. Are you ready? And just wanted to start by saying that there are two main psychological causes of guilt, right? And when we define guilt is the idea that something that we've done is not quite right. You can call it evil, you can call it a mistake or wrongdoing, but that's what guilt is. But when we go on to understand the why we feel guilt, there are two main reasons, and this is from Joanna de Angelis. And she says, number one, and it's a big one, it comes from that deep, dark shadow of our past. It is really born out of the awareness of our errors or mistakes that we may have caused, that may have damaged or hurt someone, or something. The number two, the second cause, it is simply put, and that's the beauty of Joanna de Angelis, by the way, that she looks into our immortal being, our life after life after life, for many of the reasons when she's discussing issues, but she also always brings to our current life. So for that, she specifically talks about how guilt is originated in our own childhood based on our education, how we dealt with our parents, our caretaking community, our teachers, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started with the definition of guilt. Guilt is simply a mechanism. It's an alert, a warning sign that brings to us this idea that there's something not quite right, and because it's not quite right, it's creating a conflict in our conscience. Says, okay, we do this, but what is the trigger for that mechanism to come through, right? How can we talk about feeling guilty, becoming aware of our guilt? Well, it really stems from, as we said before, and we're going to spend a few minutes talking about that first cause, a psychological cause of guilt, which is our dark shadow, right? This shadow that we bring from, and I put my hands here because I'm talking about our past lives. So the trigger for that is the guilt that is repressed. So when we start reading about it, the first thing that comes to our mind is, okay, we can see education, we can see past lives, but if it is repressed, how come we feel guilty of it, right? And we can also ask, how does it even reappear, come to the surface? What is the process? How does it happen? What and how do we even feel about this whole notion of guilt? And the answer to that is just if we think about it, if we reflect upon our own landscape of feelings, we usually feel anger, and that's the warning sign, right? We feel anger toward ourselves, hence the guilt. When we, for example, experience an event, when we fail, when we make an error, anything that we believe it's wrong, right? Our reactions may include anger, hatred, even a desire for revenge. And this is important because I myself, when I start to study guilt, I could just anger. You talk about anger when I'm feeling guilty. It doesn't compute, but it is, according to the literature. That reaction, the anger, hatred, etc., may be directed at us. We are angry for, ah, again, Marcia, I made that mistake again, or in that repressed dark shadow, as Joanna calls it, it can be something that comes very unconsciously, right? But those reactions are directed to others or to ourselves when the mistake is quite clear. Oh, I recognize there's a mistake, so now I'm angry. What happens when, for example, the trigger, that anger is not clear to us? We don't see the mistake. Well, Joanna de Angelis tells us that when we're not aware of the impact of our mistaken actions, those errors are linked to our personal primitive consciousness. She calls it primarism. And it's funny because we were just talking a while ago about the words, right? How can we get ready to use the right words? And that's one that is quite hard to understand, but it is the notion of the deep primitive conscience that we all carry. And even though we don't know what we made in a repressed past, right? We don't know what we made, that we had a mistake, a failure, because we do not perceive that, we are not aware. But our, primitive consciousness, we are aware that something is not quite right. So it is part of a journey of growth as evolving spirits that we recognize that. And it's important to note that we move slowly. It's not a very fast journey. We move slowly beyond that complete unawareness, that complete ignorance that we had made a mistake in the past, to all the way to the point that perhaps today we start to recognize very quickly that there's something wrong, and we feel a different kind of feeling, remorse. When we feel remorse, we know, oh, now it's the good stuff, because it's from the moment that we feel that we're able to clearly identify and have in our hands our ability to deal with it. But that's the problem, right? A second problem, unawareness. But when we feel the remorse, if we stuck in that feeling, right? So it's very interesting. Allan Kardec, in the Spirit's book, question 835, he asks the following: is freedom of conscience the natural consequence of freedom of thought? Right? So if I don't think about it, do I have a clear, free conscience? And the answer is quite small. It says the conscience is an inner thought that belongs to the individual, like all the other thoughts entertained by that person. So remorse belongs to each one of us, but many of us feel remorse when they don't know why. I haven't done anything. I remember just a little anecdote about, oh, almost 30 years ago, when I was asked to, don't laugh, please, but I was invited to facilitate a study group on inner transformation. And I found it quite interesting, because my very first reaction when I started to get ready to begin the class, and believe me, I remember today because it was so silly of me, but I felt, what are we talking about, this inner voyage, inner transformation? Why me? I'm such a good person. I don't do anything wrong. And ha 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 ha, 30 years later, we know that's not the case, right? But that's what I felt and thought, this complete unawareness of all the baggage that I brought in. So, as I said, remorse belongs to each one of us, right? And it's that feeling that we have. And if we don't have the strength, the courage to engage in a process that I call reparation or damage control, we may fall prey to the remorse itself. And if that is the case, what happens to us? Well, something quite interesting happens. Our conscience, through our remorse, transfer the conflict that we feel. We are, there is something there saying there's a conflict here, in the form of guilt, to the archives of our spirit. So basically, we push the conflict to those archives without really being aware of it. If the guilt that is repressed triggers a response, when, let's say, you just get up in the morning and you're going to drink coffee, but something, either by reading a book or watching a movie or something, some association of ideas or memories, they trigger something inside of us, which is stored in our personal unconscious. And then what we feel when that happens? Well, unfortunately, the most common response is anguish, right? We don't know, but we're feeling anxiety. We don't really know where it's coming from, but we are feeling it. It's a very real feeling. And what's worse, in my opinion, is that without knowing it, we also end up, again, a very unconscious mechanism. We also end up punishing ourselves as a way to free ourselves from guilt. Guilt feelings from errors or mistakes that we don't even recognize, or those mistakes, those errors that are now in our internal map of our personal and non-transferable accomplishments, achievements, whatever we've done. Does this make sense to you? I hope it does, because it's quite interesting when we see there's no way out. If you're aware or not, we are faced with the notion of guilt. And I would like to really emphasize here that this is not something for us to discard or diminish or dilute, right? Those emotional responses are quite strong, and they appear to us in the form of ideas, right? Or and ideas from what we call unconscious memories, or when they're partially or totally repressed, they resurface to our awareness in our behaviors. We all have joked about the Freudian slip, right? They just resurface out of nowhere, and they resurface as well as in dreams. And with that, now we are front and center, having to address a psychological conflict that we bring with us. Whoops, whoops, whoops. I did not talk yet about the second cause of a psychological cause of guilt. Let's spend a few more minutes doing that, which is education. Yeah, Jonah DeAngelis, in her books, those two that I'm referencing today, she tells us that when we, as parents, we prevent our children from, let's say, develop their own sense of identity for whatever reason. And there are many explanations. This is not a talk for us to say, you're a horrible person, you're a horrible parent. No, we all do this. But when we do it, when we prevent our children to develop their sense of identity, this type of education can lead to installation of guilt in that child. So examples of that are seen in right, when we live, as we say, live vicariously through our children, when we live and we transfer our dreams that were not executed, they did not become a reality, and we transfer them to our own children. Let's say, and I'm joking here, partially joking, but let's say you wanted to be an artist, right? And your parents go like, no, you're not going to be an artist. That's not the way for you to grow and be educated, because you're going to become a starving artist. So you're not going to do it. And then without knowing, your children become artists. So that's the transference that comes. And if they do that because you are transferring to them your dream, there may be a guilt for not doing something else, right? Um, what about the opposite of this? We want to make sure our children are so successful. And we started, I remember a movement so many years ago that a baby at 2 months of age, you're already putting classical music, you're starting to expose the child to different languages, etc., out of our desire for our children to be as educated as possible. But there's a point that we do that too much. We instill that sense of discipline that is so rigid in some cases that it may become tyrannical. right? We are tyrant at home. You have to do this. You have to say, exercise X number of hours a day, or study here, etc., etc. Excuse me. I think I need to cough, so I'm going to go on mute. My apologies. So sorry. I may be losing my voice. My apologies. So, as tyrants, right, we may create too many limits, and we can also, a third type of educational trends that may lead to guilt is through manipulations or threats, such as, if you don't do this, something else will happen. I remember, as I was get ready to come here today, I remember the fact that I had a nanny when I was growing up, that she was terrible. She would say, "You have to go take it." I'm talking about 3 years old, right? 4 years old. You got to go take a shower now. Otherwise, and she would create some magical monsters that would catch me. And those are the things that can be even seen as whimsical for some, but it can lead some areas of guilt in the child. How is it? Well, let's talk about it later, because I also want to add here the fact that even beyond our nannies and our us as parents, but our teachers also have a big role in perhaps pushing guilt, instilling guilt when they are, let's say, frustrated, right? They're or insecure. So they transfer their frustration, their insecurity to the kids. And by doing that, they push those children to behave in a contrary manner to which it was best for them. And I'm talking about, let's say, I don't know, you are a youth, right? 12, 13, 14, you start to look for career choices, and your teachers will push you to do something that is not true, authentic to yourself. Or the other ways as maybe younger student, where it is you are reprimanded for being a free thinker or somebody who speaks a lot, etc., etc. So those reprimands, those punishments that may trigger in the child some guilt feelings. And our children, they respond, of course. They're there, the sponge of absorbing and reacting to many inputs, and they may respond by repressing their dreams, their desires, their wishes to become who they truly are, because they want to be not punished, right? They don't want to go against. They want to be good children, and if, especially in the scenario of parents that are two disciplinarians, right? They feel they don't have a way out. They are obligated to please their parents, their teachers, etc. So if we think about in this landscape of how we educate our children, we start to look that if they respond, right, positively to our educational ways, our instrument, and they show up as this perfect child, well-to-do, well-composed, a picture of well-being, right? They actually, as you know, appearances may be deceiving. They may, at the same time, carry the burden of their deeply seated frustrations, and at some point, at almost a pathological point, they start to lose the references of what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, so on and so forth. Did I say it all? No, I didn't. There's yet another example, because of when we, as a defense mechanism, this is to protect ourselves as parents, to our lack of time. I may have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs, right? Or my one job as a parent is all consuming. We are not present. So our absence is felt, and many of us as parents, we fill our children with, oh, I don't know, toys, games, whatever, to satiate the need for time for real education with our parents. So it is an immature attitude. Yeah, I know, right? But we even do that as parents to, I don't know how to discipline you, but I'll use, I will bribe you with very material things, or I can also use emotional bribery to get you to do what I need you to do. So it is a distraction mechanism, if you will, for the kids. But as we distract our children, what are we doing? We're running away from our responsibility in terms of that educational mission that we have to have those essential framework of parenting our children. So it is with that that Joanna the Angels remind us that when any of those happen, our children may grow up codependent. And what she means by that is that our children grow up without understanding that they have a freedom, independence to act. They don't have access to be satisfied, or they even blame themselves for every time that they are, say, achieving a source of emotional pleasure and well-being, but that is outside of the familial or societal expectations and impositions. They start to blame themselves. Oh my goodness, it feels like a catch-22, right? No matter what we do, we are confronted with instilling or instill in us guilt. And we do this. We try to save ourselves from our conflicts. We do this by being, especially this is a very gender-based reaction. We end up being good girls, right? And we lose our ability to have a voice to say no. We lose the also the ability to be spontaneous, or worse of all, in alignment with our true truths, what we think, what we feel, what we want. So as a child, we get punished in that higher level punishment when we oppose to something, when we refuse to something else, or when we change direction from those societal or familial impositions. And we do this as children to avoid suffering, right? We want to avoid a source of conflict. But as we know, psychologically speaking, it's important to learn our boundaries, our limits, and our ability to say no, because we cannot agree with everything. The the conflict is, and it's very, dualistic language here, because when we think about the conflict, that whenever we say no, whenever we go against those impositions, is that we are actually betraying not the environment, but we're betraying ourselves whenever we fail to be who we are, to say what we think, to deny ourselves, in so many words, to not be authentic. If this was a film, I think we could all see, the end. What would be the end of this movie? Yeah, we as children get this type of education. We have all those conflicts, and as children, we become adults who are unable to be themselves, to really have a hard time in all of our journeys toward self-awareness, right? To to understand we are in this road toward our authentic self. So when we see that, just to conclude, this idea of education as the psychological cause for guilt is we are insecure, right? We don't know as children or as adult of those children. We cannot express our opinion. We are insecure. We are either unable to be who we are because we want to please others and we feel guilty inside, or we feel guilty when we satisfy ourselves but we betray the others. So it is a really interesting, because regardless what we do, our actions will trigger subtle processes of guilt. And it shows up when we want to be independent. I'm 18 years of age. I now have a car. I have a job. I can go to school, to college. I'm super independent, right? And how do I feel that when my parents are upset that I chose to be as far away from them as possible, right? And some of us now, as immature parents, we feel betrayed. We are like, we were there for you, we educated you, we brought you up, we gave you guidance. And as much as the child that chooses to distance themselves, or herself, himself, we can even verbalize our anger, right? We demand, you must pay for what I've done. I sacrificed my youth, my body, my choice of career for you. I know, terrible. We all do it, or some of us do it. Or those emotional bribes, right? I now am abandoned. You don't talk to me. You don't see me. You don't visit me. Or even complain about our children's, as they become young adults, lack of gratitude for all that you have done for them. I know, I know, I know. No matter what, we trigger feelings of guilt in our children, right? And at some point, our children will realize, and this is the positive thing, that they are not a reflection of their parents, that they think differently from us. They behave, they have different desires, different goals in their life. And it's at this point, we as parents and educators must have the wisdom to support what is right, to modify what is not compatible with what the real education should be. And yes, my friends, guilt is persistent, it is dangerous, it is a tormentor that requires us to be very keenly aware of our emotional, psychological state to be free of that. Whew. Let's go on to the next, not so difficult slide, because we're going to talk a little bit about how we are prisoners of our own guilt. Are you ready? Well, when you talk about being prisoners of our own guilt, when and why do we fall prey to ourselves? Well, in one simple term, we create a bridge to it. We are in tune to that sense of guilt. Yes, it's we do it. Guilt somehow in this process finds this perfect resonance of us with our darkest landscapes, right, of our personality. And that resonance are conflicts or whatever feelings we have that is it of a petty type of characteristic, right? When we feel, let's say, that we're angry or we're resentful or we are upset or frustrated, all those feelings they create a bridge for us to really be in resonance with our guilt. So if we think about it in this notion of a prison that guilt puts us in, Guilt nourishes those that darkness, those dark landscapes of our own personality. So the more you have them, the more guilt you have. The more guilt you have, the stronger those that darkness is, and it interferes um, with negatively impacted actions, right? And our behaviors and our even our mechanism to show affections. How is that? Because when we feel guilty in that prison of guilt, we end up starting to distance ourselves. We may become quite sad, unhappy, unmotivated because aware or not, conscious or not, we are afraid of making new mistakes, to fail again. And from that perspective, it's quite serious. And this aloof, the aloofness that we may feel, that the distancing from those who are closest to me, may lead me to depression. And it also leads to behaviors which is the opposite, right? If I don't go into becoming very distant from everybody, very sad, very inward in my depression, I can also, as a mechanism, this is all a mechanism of defense, right? We may also go into this mechanism to everything I have a justification. I it's even when it's inappropriate, I have to excuse myself. I'm so sorry. I've done this. I'm so sorry. And in this behavior, it's a evidence of one of the mechanisms of a guilt. So, question here for us: if it's so normal for all of us to make a mistake, why in the world do we feel guilty? What is the problem? Well, there's no problem except if we keep doing the same mistakes, right? If we keep harming people, if we don't even, as I mentioned before, in the early development process, we don't even recognize that we're making mistakes. So, if we are to conclude here, we would say a life is defined by feelings of guilt, right? And when it is defined as that, it is a life of pain. We are now aware that we are the ones who actually feed and sustain our life of pain with our own insecurity. I want to read, and I think we have a little bit more time, but I want to read Allan Kardec's point that he brings to us in Heaven and Hell. He says the following: there are faults of which individuals may be guilty, but which do not cause any direct and personal injury to other people, right? Yeah, I'm guilty. I'm so guilty because there was I don't know, a spill in this ocean and now wildlife is dying. I don't know. But there are faults that happen and we do not cause anyone's direct or injury. In such cases, he says, Allan Kardec, in such cases, the reparation of a fault is accomplished in one or other following ways: by doing it in the next incarnation, what they did not do, they ought to have done, but did not do in the former one, right? So maybe I'm giving light to what Kardec says in the book Heaven and Hell, right? But maybe I feel strongly about something that I have no direct link, and I feel strong about it because in my past life I did something like that and I did not repair. I did not control or repair the damages, right? So this life, it's an opportunity for me to do so. And he says that you by doing in a subsequent incarnation what they ought to have done but did not do in a former one, whether by discharging duties which they neglected or did not see to be incumbent on them, or by fulfilling missions which they failed to fulfill in that former life, or it's many opportunities, right? Or by practicing the virtues which are the opposite of the vice in which they indulged. That is to say, by being humble if they've been haughty, gentle if they've been harsh, kindly if they have been unkind, hardworking if they've been idle, helpful if they've been useless, temperate if they have been dissolute, setting a good example if they set a bad one, and so on. It is thus that a spirit progresses by turning to a profitable account of the experience and the lessons of the past existence. In other words, guilt must be overcome through positive, rehabilitative actions. So I have a few more times, so I'm going to talk a little bit about specifically about the process of becoming free of our own prisons. Is that okay? Let's talk about repentance, right? Repentance, two words here. Repentance is very important for us because it is the mechanism that makes us aware of something and help us move forward, like Allan Kardec says, even when we don't know. If there's a trigger of anguish or something, guilt about something that I have no clue, I have no direct link to what happened, let's do something about it, or something that is very clear there. But when we repent, when we recognize in our sorry for whatever, it's important to say, oh, this is good. This is the mechanism that will propel us to move forward. In addition to repentance as the first step, the second step is reparation, right? Which is the active, and by active, I mean it's a way for you to be actionable with your feelings, your thoughts, and it is even the best way to release our emotional state. I'd like to bring just a few words here, not words, but reflections about the idea of individuation, right? Because when we feel guilty, we somehow are devaluing ourselves, right? We distress ourselves, and we do this with ideas that are not positive or pleasant. And if I were to ask you and me right now, what is our view of ourselves, right? How do we feel? Do we feel happy? Do we feel accomplished? Or do we feel, in some cases, despicable? What are the conflicts that we bring in our day to day that we carry within? And I'm going to go into all the way to the notion of if I were, I am not, I swear, if I were a serial killer, right? A serial criminal, I, right? I carry this unconscious guilt that is here, but it's actually propelling me to kill, to new killing, new homicides, and that impulse of a psychopath really is an impulse to nullify, to erase the feelings because they don't have the capacity for empathy or the lucid mind regarding what they've done. You know, and what they've done, that serial killer, that serial criminal can be acts of atrocity, of monstrosities, right? So psychopaths have, we know now, fragmented minds and are incapable to go through this self-evaluation. But hooray, hooray, we are not psychopaths. We feel guilty. So you see, it's really good for us to feel guilty. And with that, we need to just come to conclusion with talking a little bit about this so-called individuation process. So what is individuation? Sorry, individuation is the integration of all, and it's a big words now, right? Incongruent aspects of our personality. What we mean is we are, and we all are doing this, by the way, we all are integrating who we are by getting the pieces of who we are in this process. We integrate all the aspects in all, I would say, all the colors, right, of our personality, all of our feelings, all of our impulses, all of the past mistakes and past achievements. This process of integration is the way that we become a part of the whole. When we become a part of, say, our society. But think about it. How I differentiate myself from the society, right? And become part of society at the same time. It's a very interesting notion of duality that Joanna J. Angelis brings and plays with it so much, right? Because I'm saying that I am going to now absorb, accept, embrace all the aspects, the good, the bad, and the ugly of who I am, right? But by doing this, I may no longer be the model person that, for example, Marcia thought she was about 30 years ago when she said, I am a good person. I never make any mistakes. I am good. Well, stop there, buddy. You really are not. But when we start to look with love to who we are, when we start to integrate, we also start to have the courage to be different from whatever is expected of me, right? So, in so many words, I can accept that I think and I behave in a different way than everybody else. And in this difference, process of individuation, in this difference from everybody else, in my authentic self, a way of being, in this difference, we all will be feeling guilty. Oh my gosh, Marcia, I thought you're going to tell us what can I do to be free from guilt, right? It is really interesting because if you think about it, if I evolve, will individuate, and we all do, by the way, we all evolve. But whenever I evolve, I individuate myself a little bit more. I develop my personality a little bit more. I individuate every time I grow and or I come back with a new incarnation. And just for having advanced in this long process of individuation, I will always feel some sort of guilt because I no longer play a subscribed role. I'm doing air quotes here, and I am not so good at adapting to what society expected of me, of what my family expected of me, of what my professors, instructors, teachers expected of me, of what society expected of me. I will be adapting to this new way of being that I may not even know if I'm ready to be that, right? And that's where the automatism for the feelings of guilt. I find it quite interesting to think of that. And let's just talk a little bit about true freedom, right? Because if we go about, we talked about the psychological causes of guilt. We talked about different types of guilt, and there is we're not going to go into that today, but there's this existential guilt, which is symbolic in nature. There is guilt of anxiety, which is a false guilt. We're not going to go there. And we're going to talk about what we say the true guilt, or the guilt that requires you to have a responsibility for what you have done, right? This is considered the healthy guilt, because it is linked to all of our behaviors and identifies this feeling of guilt when, right, when we are not aligned with our true sense of ethics or our true standards. This feeling, as I said, we call it the true guilt, is one that is healthy because it leads to a sense of responsibility. So without that guilt, the healthy guilt, we would not have control over the thoughts, the actions, or right negligence in not doing the actions that we may have done, and all the negative impacts that we have caused. So if we don't have guilt, we would be as irresponsible as those psychopaths. I said it. Yes, I said it. So we all make mistakes, and some of us make some quite serious mistakes. And this here is my plea for all of us to not be discouraged, because we have a mission in this life, and in our reincarnational plan, we have commitments, and we just need to carry on. And to do so, to truly free ourselves from the conflicts that we carry within, we just need to forgive. And this forgiveness may be directed at ourselves, right? This forgiveness may be directed to those that were harmed by us, and that really includes our community or even nature. Remember the example of the oil spill somewhere out there. We know that we cannot really live a life of peace, truly peace, if we are harboring that sense of guilt. Therefore, I'm saying to all of you, let's do this. Let's exercise understanding who we are, understanding our so-called weaknesses, right? So that by going through this inner journey of understanding who we are, we can free ourselves from all the pains from those conflicts. And I also need to say to everyone, we need to have courage. Yes, courage to ask for forgiveness, or the courage and the ability to be able to forgive. So understanding and forgiveness are, according to Joanna de Angelis, the two mechanisms to release guilt in all of us. We understand, right? And we forgive. So in final conclusion, when we are aware of our mistakes, this is the exact time to also seek the possibility to address it by repairing any harm that we have caused, right? As I mentioned before, those harms can be your words, right? Or your thoughts in some cases, or our actions or inactions. So if that is the case, and this is a question for all of us, what is the most efficient way to address, to repair the damages caused and free ourselves from this terrible sense of guilt? Well, just help the person who has been offended or harmed, right? Restore what was damaged. It's simple as that. And you say, okay, 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 but you talked a lot today, Marcia, and you also mentioned the repressed guilt. Right? What is the way to free ourselves from the guilt that has been repressed, or still remains in the unconscious because, say, it originated in a past life. Well, this is so cool. We can do it. We can do that by changing our attitude towards life, towards our relationships. We can do this by forgiving, meaning giving, immersing ourselves to serving others, to giving to others, becoming a resource for our own sense of peace and harmony, as well as the others, and have the courage to embark in the journey to know ourselves, right? So the more we know ourselves, the more we are free from the conflicts we carry. So even when we are unaware of our where our guilt comes from, we feel it, right? We feel when we are anguish, when we feel anguish, when we are insecure, when we are just not satisfied with life, or when we feel that we're not deserving. No, 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 no. I am incapable of doing something good because I'm guilty. So I invite all of us to make this effort toward a life of solidarity, a life of compassion, because those are really cool mechanisms for diluting our pains stemming from conflict. And finally, let's remember that is quite common for the feeling of shame to set during our childhood, when at that point we don't have any idea of what is right, what is wrong, what is being a responsible adult later on, what are duties. But deep inside, our conscience knows what is correct, what is not. So guilt has to do with the action of doing something wrong. Shame has to do with the awareness of our actions that were irresponsible. So it's the knowledge of the impact of what we've done. So with that, I say mental and behavioral health requires that we look into guilt with an eye for releasing it, with a disposition to leverage our discernment, right, our awareness as the mechanism to help us be able to first evaluate and maybe calibrate the quality of our life, of our actions, of our thoughts. And our emotional well-being demands that we just confront and make amends whenever we fail, and continue our own march toward our growth. And I would like, I believe I have a couple of minutes. I would like to leave today, and it's 3 paragraphs, but I'd like to leave today with the answer to the following questions found in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 8, item 7. So the question that was posed was, do we suffer consequence for a bad thought, even if it is not followed by the actual action? And at this point, this is from the gospel, it is necessary to make an important distinction. As the soul advances along its path to evolution and spiritualization, it will slowly become more enlightened, and so, little by little, divest itself of its imperfections according to the greater or lesser goodwill it demonstrates within its free will. Therefore, all evil thoughts result from the imperfections of the soul. But according to the strength of the desire to purify itself, those evil thoughts becomes a means of advancement when it is energetically repelled. This is an indication of a positive action by the soul in order to extinguish a blemish. In this way, it will not give in to the temptation to satisfy an evil desire, and having resisted the soul, feels itself to be stronger and content with the victory. On the contrary, the person who has made no good resolutions will look for every opportunity to practice evil, and if this is not achieved, it will not be for the wanting, but for the lack of opportunity. The person then will be just as guilty as if he or she had actually committed evil. To summarize, Kardec says a certain degree of progress has already been achieved by the person who does not conceive the idea of committing evil. For the person who feels the urge, right? Urge, but constantly repels it, progress is in the process of realization. But for the person who thinks in terms of evil, taking pleasure in these thoughts, then the evil still exists in all its strengths. In the one, the work has been done, whereas in the other, it's still to be started. But being just, God takes into account all these gradations when it comes to individual responsibilities for acts and thoughts. So, with that, I think we are in a good shape. As I said before, the references for today talk came from Existential Conflict by Joanna de Angelis through the psychography of Divaldo Pereira Franco and Jesus in Our Days by the same. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk a little bit about guilt.
Thank you ever so much, Marcia, for the insights and reflections you provided us today. We're now open for questions and comments from the audience. From Ana Paula Teles, it helps us accepting ourselves as we are and gathering courage to go on towards plenitude. Thanks a lot for these reflections.
Yes, Ana Paula, thanks. Thanks for your comments. It's always good. That is not all black and white, and it sometimes feels like it's black and black, right? it's no matter where you go, there's guilt coming through, but we are a imperfect spirit in a journey for our own plenitude or perfection. So thanks.
Okay, from Wendell Almeida. Thank you for the great lecture. If I may, I have a question. Are there different ways of dealing with guilt when it arises from factors related to psychological circumstances of the current life or from past incarnations?
Yes, thank you, Wendell. It's very simple but very hard at the same time, right? If it is current life, just the awareness of it. So repent is the first step. Then the second step is actually start to ask for forgiveness, right? The awareness and ask for forgiveness, and then go on in the journey toward repairing, addressing the damage. And those damages can be, I don't know, a psychological damage, right? Or something that is hurting someone else, and that someone else may be you that is actually feeling guilty from your past incarnations. And this comes from both Kardec as well as Joanna de Angelis. We bring here the idea that if you're feeling something, just take this time to recognize your feelings. Yeah, I may not understand why I'm feeling this way, but get into action. And if there is no active or activity or activism that you can engage on, just look for ways to be better, to be positive, to allow yourself to be in a position that you are free from those conflicts. And those conflicts really come to us in form of many times, and it's terrible to say this, but many, many times in the form of hatred, right? I hate myself, or I hate Brad. I'm going to be joking here, but I hate Brad for this, or I hate you, Wendell, for asking this question. And it's just very interesting because it is, in a way, how our emotions deal with the conflicts, right? That your ego may say, hey, 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 something is wrong here. This conflict is trying to damage my own self-awareness. So then I get to that those very strong emotions.
Good. From the United States Spiritist Federation, we have a question. Is blaming ourselves when anything goes wrong, even with other people, the same as guilt?
Very good question, right? Because we talked about guilt, but also the sense of shame, which is the knowledge that something is wrong. But one of the response mechanism of our guilt is this inappropriate, and I say inappropriate because you don't see a direct correlation, and it's inappropriate excuse, right? If anything goes wrong, I'm the first one to say it was me, right? Or I'm not deserving of this. I am somebody who is below par because there's something wrong, there's a conflict. So to answer the question here, and thank you so much for the question, it's just a sense of guilt permeates our landscape, our psychological landscape, and we just need to be very good about addressing those conflicts in a way that is actionable and that free yourself from falling behind, right? Being a prisoner of your own guilt. And that's the message that I would like to bring here for everyone. Let's be aware of the shackles that we impose in ourselves for feeling whatever, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, feeling that you're not deserving, feeling anguish, feeling sorrow, feeling depressed. Let us all see those as potential prisons that is put by us from our own guilt.
Okay, very good. Also, another question from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Can we train ourselves mentally not to accept the transfer of others' frustrations? And can this be taught to children?
Oh, I love this question. And I'm not prepared because I'm not a child psychologist to say how to do it, but absolutely, right? And it's all about authenticity, right? Understanding that, and as spiritists, we in a good group here because we all know that our children may be older souls than ourselves, right? They may bring with themselves much more wisdom and knowledge than us and what we have, and really be aware of the trappings. And this is a big thought here, the trappings of societal impositions, right? So when we see as immortal soul, I may have lived 1,000 years ago, that if I were, let's say 1200 in Europe, let's say, as a woman, my life would be very different. The expectations of me would be very, very different, right? Than that is. The person that comes to my mind as I'm saying this is Clara of Assisi, right? Where she wanted, she had this longing to be part of the movement that St. Francis did, but as a woman she couldn't, and she rebelled, but she rebelled and was not guilty because she was actually going toward her authentic self. So to answer is just be clear about uh, the the immortal spirit that we are, and how to look for being authentic, right? And being responsible for what we cause to ourselves and to others. Unfortunately, our children and our youth are going through so much hurt right now. It is very difficult even to talk about it because we are confronted with many parents with children that are in some cases depressed, in some other cases suffering for severe anxiety, other cases yet considering suicide or self-harming, and it is hard, but we can only address that by being very truthful to and authentic to what we are, in order not to fall prey to egoic behaviors and expectations.
Oh, very good. From the TVCEI International Spiritist Council. When Paul of Tarsus met Jesus, he did not get paralyzed by guilt, but started actively working to repair his wrongs. But he carried his guilt until the end of his physical life. Can you comment on this?
Oh, yes. This is probably the very best example for all of us, right? Paul of Tarsus, who was Saul, he accepts, he in the road to Damascus, he sees Jesus and all of his ancestral goal, as we are told, right? He already knew that he was to follow Jesus, but he was the biggest the biggest enemy of all early Christians of the time, being the mechanism or the one person that drove to so many different types of atrocities, including stoning. And boy, where would we be today if Paul, confronting with his own guilt, he did all those things, right? He just stopped. And he didn't. And he just moved himself to, and he was so moved by this refining himself that he was there. You all know about this desire to speak in the congregation. No, you're not ready. And he responded by going to his desert, right? His time to really confront and become the man that he ultimately became, Paul of Tarsus. But regardless of that, he carried his guilt. And I think it's important for us to understand that the feelings of guilt, those conflicts that we bring, is part of our journey. But let's turn it into that healthy guilt instead of a paralyzing guilt that will stop us from doing anything. Thank you for the comment and the question.
Very good. From Violet, Spiritism helped me to forgive myself and sing every day as a new opportunity to be a better person.
Love it. Love that, Violet. Well done. Right. That's the first part, is let us know that in all the heaven and hell, spirits book, gospel, in the books that we reference today, we all talk about guilt. We all talk about failure of mistakes, but we all talk about the fact that we are on the road toward our own infinite happiness, our plenitude, our fulfillment, when one day we will be so mature that even the idea of failing, of making mistakes is out of our vocabulary. So, but let's forgive us first so that we can start acting and addressing any damages that we may have caused. And again, those damages can be to ourselves or to people, to our family, to our society, to our community. It doesn't matter, but let's be courageous to first and foremost forgive ourselves.
Very good. From Anna Paula Teles, which books of Joanna de Angelis would you suggest to read about the subject?
Good question. So, Jesus in our days, chapter 5 speaks of it. Plenitude, specifically chapter 13, Ana Paula. And I don't know because I'm thinking in Portuguese, but I'm going to say in a rough translation, forgive me, by Life Challenges and Solutions. She spends 2 chapters on that. Amor imbatível amor, so it's love. Imbattable. I don't know how to even translate that. It's the one that has the most. It's I highly ask you to, or invite you to read that book. Right, Existential Conflicts is the one that is my favorite. But it's Joanna talks about the healthy guilt. She talks about the guilt that is not. It does not. Puts us in a way to hurt us. the therapeutical guilt. She talks about the shameful guilt. So she goes on into many, many different other types of guilt that you may really find interesting. I find that the topic of discussion here really very intriguing to all of us.
Very good. And from Violet, can guilt be manifested as disease in one's body? Is there documentation from the spirit world?
Oh, that's a good question, Viola. I have to get back to you. Where is the documentation? But in Joanna's books, she brings that and existential conflicts. As you know, each chapter she in most of her books are three, but the last part of each chapter it's the therapies. But she often brings about how guilt or those conflicts that we carry is somatized in our body. Absolutely, be it by diseases or by other mental issues that we may carry. And remember, when we talk about guilt, Violet, we also talked about that when we are unconscious of our guilt, we start to map it in our perispirit, right? So it comes later, even if it's not now.
Okay, very good. So we want to thank you, Marcia, and many thanks to everyone who's watched today's talk live and those who have been following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. Please don't miss our next live next Saturday, November 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, when Olivia Trevisani will be speaking about destiny of children in the spirit world. Marcia, before we close the live, would you please say a prayer?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Bradley. So if we, at this moment, simply close our eyes, if you want to, and connect with God and the spirits of light that are here with us today during this time that we're together, touching our hearts, touching our minds as well, inspiring us to be courageous and to be forgiving, to be understanding and to be tolerant with ourselves, with our failings, with everyone else that is also carrying the burden of their guilt with themselves. May we all leave today with a sense of lightness, that our burdened selves may be less, so that we are now strong enough to address all the conflicts of our heart, of our mind, of our spirit. So be it.